I never imagined that my life would take such a dark and twisted turn. My name is Daniel, I'm 38, and I work in construction management. I've always been a calm, steady man, the type who believes in logic and action over emotion. I've been married to Sarah for 12 years, and we have a 6-year-old son, Ethan. For most of our marriage, I thought we had a strong bond. Sure, we had our disagreements, but I believed we were partners in every sense. Sarah has always been charismatic, loved by everyone she met. She's intelligent, charming, and has a way of making people feel like they're the only person in the room. I admired her for it, and I trusted her implicitly. Ethan has been the light of both our lives. I'd never imagined that the very people I trusted most could betray me in such a horrifying way. It all started subtly. I noticed Sarah's attitude toward our son's school events changing. She became unusually eager to volunteer, often spending more time at the school than she normally would. I didn't think much of it at first. She's always been active and involved. But then came the little hints, the strange excitement in her messages, the way she'd be protective of her phone, and the sudden unexplained extra work meetings she would leave for without telling me where she was going. One evening, I was organizing Ethan's school papers for parent-teacher night when I found an unusual email. It wasn't meant for me, but my eyes caught it. It was from Mrs. Reynolds, Ethan's teacher. The tone was playful, almost flirtatious, and it was addressed to Sarah personally. My heart sank, but I tried to convince myself I was reading too much into it. Still, a seed of doubt had been planted, and I couldn't ignore it. Over the next few weeks, I observed Sarah closely. I didn't confront her. I didn't text. I stayed quiet. I watched the patterns, the sudden late nights, the whispered phone calls in the bathroom, the way she would smile at texts and quickly hide her phone when I entered the room. Something was off, and my gut told me it was worse than I could handle. Then came the moment I could no longer ignore. It was a Friday evening, and Ethan had a small recital at school. I stayed behind after the performance, pretending to help clean up while I kept an eye on the teacher, Mrs. Reynolds. That's when I saw it. The look on Sarah's face, the way she lingered with Mrs. Reynolds after everyone else had left. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just a friendship. It was something deeper. Something forbidden. I left quietly, my mind racing. I knew I couldn't act rashly. I had to understand the full scope of what was happening before I confronted anyone. I started keeping careful notes of their interactions, the late-night messages I could see, the small excuses that didn't add up. The more I observed, the clearer it became. Sarah was having an affair with my son's teacher. And the thought of what that meant for my family, for Ethan, made my stomach twist. I didn't say a word to Sarah that weekend. I acted as if everything was normal, but inside I was storming. I continued my observations quietly, blending into the background of our home and our lives while she carried on as if nothing had changed. There's a strange power in silence. The world assumes you are unaware. The truth is, you see everything. Over the next few weeks, I noticed how carefully she covered her tracks. Messages deleted, late-night meetings disguised as errands, sudden trips to the grocery store that conveniently coincided with Mrs. Reynolds' late shifts. Every interaction between them was deliberate, calculated, yet still careless enough for someone like me to notice. The more I watched, the more her confidence irritated me. She believed she was untouchable, that no one would discover her secret. At home, Sarah maintained her mask flawlessly. She laughed at my jokes, prepared dinner, and played the loving mother to Ethan. But the air between us changed. There was a subtle tension, a faint distance that I refused to acknowledge outwardly. She didn't know that I had begun keeping a small notebook, documenting times, messages, and strange encounters. Every detail mattered. Every tiny slip could be the thread I needed to unravel the entire web. The contrast between her public and private self was stark. At home, she was the devoted wife and mother. Outside, she was secretive, flirtatious, reckless. I watched her interactions at school events, pretending to be busy while my eyes followed her every move. There was a small thrill in knowing the truth while everyone else remained oblivious. Not out of pride, but out of necessity. This was my family. This was my child. And I had to be certain before taking any action. Then one evening, the breaking point arrived. Ethan had a school project that required parental assistance, and naturally I volunteered. Mrs. Reynolds was in the classroom late, preparing materials. Sarah appeared a few minutes later, claiming she had left work early. The way she smiled at Mrs. Reynolds made my blood boil. It was the same smile she had reserved for me years ago, but now it was meant for someone else. I left before they noticed me, but my mind was racing. I couldn't believe I had let it go this far without confronting her. I started planning carefully. This wasn't about revenge in a childish sense. It wasn't about drama or shame. It was about truth. Exposing the betrayal while keeping my composure, ensuring that the consequences fell squarely on her actions. I needed her to realize fully and undeniably that what she had done was unacceptable. Not just morally but socially. I wanted everyone who mattered in our lives to see it too. The next step was delicate. I began discreetly collecting evidence. Screenshots, hidden notes, even subtle recordings of conversations when she thought no one was listening. It felt surreal. I had spent years building a life of trust, stability, and honesty, only to have it crumble silently, piece by piece, right in front of me. But the calm in me remained. I wasn't angry yet, I was focused. Focused on ensuring that the moment of exposure would be complete, undeniable, and final. I kept my interactions with Sarah normal. I smiled at her, asked about her day, and spent time with Ethan like nothing had happened. The quiet tension between us was palpable, but she had no idea how close the walls were closing in around her carefully constructed lies. Every action she took, every hidden conversation, was just another step toward the inevitable. The day of reckoning finally arrived. I didn't want confrontation at home. Too messy. Too personal. I decided to do it in a way that left no room for denial, no space for excuses. I invited a few close friends from our neighborhood, people I trusted, under the pretense of a casual dinner. I knew Sarah would never suspect what was coming. She arrived radiant as always, carrying that same confident smile. I kept my demeanor calm, polite, as if nothing was wrong. Ethan was playing in the living room, oblivious to the storm about to hit. Sarah didn't suspect a thing. She laughed, chatted, and even boasted slightly about how busy she had been helping at Ethan's school. Then I called Mrs. Reynolds. She answered hesitantly, thinking it was about Ethan's upcoming school project. I asked her politely to come over, explaining there was something we needed to discuss regarding Ethan's progress. Curiosity and obligation brought her to my door. I watched Sarah's eyes widen the moment she realized the teacher was here, in our home, with everyone else arriving soon. Once everyone had gathered, I calmly laid out the evidence. Screenshots of messages, notes of suspicious meetings, conversations recorded without her knowledge. Each piece was factual, undeniable, and meticulously documented. I spoke slowly, measured, letting each truth sink in. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I simply presented reality. The room fell silent. Sarah's confidence crumbled in real time. The mask she had maintained for months shattered. Her face turned pale, her voice faltered as she tried to fabricate excuses, but I remained steady, letting the evidence speak louder than any argument she could muster. Mrs. Reynolds stood quietly, uncomfortable, but unable to deny the truth. The shock and betrayal were evident on the faces of our friends and neighbors, the very people who had always trusted us as a family. I looked at Sarah calmly. "Do you have anything to say?" I asked. She shook her head, tears welling up. It wasn't remorse, it was fear. The fear of losing control, of being exposed, of facing the consequences she had ignored for so long. I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for what our family had become. Relief that the truth was finally clear to everyone. Ethan was brought into the room gently. I explained in simple words that Mommy had made a mistake, but that he was safe and loved, and that his dad was always here for him. I wanted him to understand that betrayal does not define him or our bond. Sarah remained speechless. Mrs. Reynolds, embarrassed, left quietly. The exposure was complete. The balance of power had shifted. That night, Sarah packed her things and left, with the weight of her actions pressing heavily upon her. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She simply disappeared from our home, and I never saw her the same way again. I stayed with Ethan, our bond stronger than ever. I had chosen calm, observation, and evidence over anger. That choice had preserved my dignity, protected my child, and ensured that the truth was undeniable. In the aftermath, I realized something crucial. Betrayal is not always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle and hidden behind smiles and routines. But truth has a way of emerging, and when it does, those who deceive must face the consequences. I had lost a wife, but I had preserved my integrity and safeguarded my child. That was victory enough.